Have you been meaning to create your own WordPress plugin but haven't because it's just complicated or you don't know where to start? Well, this tutorial is going to explain to you exactly how to create a plugin in WordPress from start to finish. It's going to go through a lot of things that are really important with plugins, including security. So as you can see on my screen, we have the most basic looking form. There's no CSS involved in this tutorial. I don't want to do a design course. I just want to show you the functionality. I'm going to show you how this works, and from there we'll start building this plugin. So this form is included in the theme with a shortcode, okay? And then I'm gonna fill this out and type a message and hit submit. It's automatically going to do a post request with AJAX to the WordPress backend. And then you'll notice here you have a submissions table which can easily be searched. So you can search by email. It would help if we had more submissions, but it definitely works. So the search works, and you can also click into each submission and check the submission that's been made, even though it does come up on the table as well. You also have a plugin options page which has specific fields that you can fill out. You can activate and deactivate the form. You can choose who you want it to be sent to, and you can also set a confirmation message that comes back to the submitter of the form once they've submitted the form. And as you can see here, this is a dynamic property which will automatically, once it's submitted, change that to the name of the person who has submitted the form. So now that I've shown you how it works, stick with me to watch me build this plugin. As you can see, I have a fresh install of WordPress installed, and it is the latest version as from the 12th of October 2022. And I also have a basic theme installed, which I'll include in the GitHub repo if you're interested in using it. It's really basic, and the page is just pretty much unstyled, purely for our plugin test. Then if we go into plugins, we have absolutely no plugins. So let's go and create one. You want to go into your code editor and open up the WordPress installation. And in this case, I've got the whole WordPress installation set up, but really we should just access the plugins folder. So to make it simpler, I'll open the folder, go into the plugin and go to plugins and just open it there. I've deleted the default plugins that come with WordPress, so you don't have to worry that yours is different or anything like that. You can just delete them as well. And let's go ahead and create a new folder, and this is going to be the folder that our plugin code stays in or resides in. And I'm going to call it contact plugin. And inside this plugin, there are two files that you typically would want to put in there. One which would be an index.php file, and the other one would be another PHP file which has the same name as the folder, so contact-plugin.php. Now, index.php is purely there to load just in case someone tries to access the plugin files directly in the browser. And the contact-plugin.php file is what holds our logic for our plugin. So I'll give you an example of why we put this index.php in there. I'll delete that and I'll go into our project. And I'm going to then try and access the plugin folder, which is WP Content Plugins Contact Plugin, directly. So you'll see that if this was a live plugin, for instance, someone would be able to just directly access the plugins folder structure and see how the plugin is made and potentially look for vulnerabilities. To stop that, it's really simple. You just create that index.php file, and inside the PHP file, you just you can leave it blank if you want to, but maybe just let the person know they can't access it and just say, you cannot be here, or whatever you want to write there. And this die will just stop the PHP script from running further than that. So let's go and access the page now. It will just say, you cannot be here. Fantastic. So that's our first line of defense. The second line of defense would be to go into our contact plugin, and we would need to do a couple of other things. But before I do that, I want to set up the basics of this plugin. At the top of every plugin file in WordPress, we do it's sort of like a comment, and the comment will have different properties in it that will display or describe to WordPress what this plugin is, and that allows WordPress to interpret it and then activate it and show it in the plugins section. So to do that, we open up our PHP tags and we do /***, and then if you're using Visual Studio Code, it should automatically do it for you. But basically make it look like this. And then inside there, we want to firstly specify what the plugin name is. I'm just going to call it the contact plugin. I'm then going to give it a description, which is for when it comes up in the plugins page on the admin. This is my test plugin. I'll give it a version. We don't really need one, but I'll do that. And then I'll do a text domain, which is more so used for translations. So if you have a multilingual website and you might want to specify different translations, you can use a text domain for your plugin. I'll just call it options-plugin. Now that we've set this up, I'm going to save it. And this should be enough for WordPress to know that this is a plugin. It should allow you to activate it. So we'll refresh the plugin page, and you should see our contact plugin is there now. It has the description. It also has the version. I'm going to activate it. Now that's it. The plugin's activated, but the plugin doesn't actually do anything. So if we go to the front page of the website, nothing happens. There's really nothing happening with this plugin. So let's deactivate it and start working on making it actually do something. So as I mentioned before, we need to protect the plugin from being accessed directly in the browser. If someone accessed this file directly in the browser, they could potentially run some code that could affect your website, or it would allow them to do things that are not intended. So the easiest way to do that would be to tell the plugin that if someone hasn't accessed the website via the absolute path, which is the path that WordPress system would use to access it, then don't allow them to access it at all. So to do that, you do an if statement, and then you do defined, if not defined, sorry, with the exclamation mark, and then abs path. So if is not defined the absolute path, then we need to exit, or we could die as well and say you cannot be here. Okay, so we'll go back here and let's try and access this plugin now. So plugins, contact plugin.php, and it should be the same thing. So before anything can get started, or any class can get instantiated, or any PHP can run, the script will die unless WordPress is accessing it. Okay, so now that we've done that, what we want to do is we want to encapsulate our logic inside a class so that there are no clashes with any other plugins on WordPress. To do that, let's create a class. I'm going to call it contact plugin using camel case. And inside there, we obviously have the methods for our class. But before we do that, we want to actually check, before this class loads, we want to check if it actually exists already. So we don't want two instances of the same class loaded. So we'll do if class exists with an exclamation mark. So it means if the class doesn't exist and the name of the class is contact plugin. So if the class contact plugin doesn't exist, then obviously load up this class, and then we will instantiate the class by doing new contact plugin. Okay, so let's go back and see if anything happened. So we'll go and activate it. Again, nothing's happened, but there are no errors, which means that it's working fine. Now, the first thing most people associate with plugins is an options page. It's somewhere on the website, on the left-hand sidebar, where someone could go and click on options and change some options that ultimately affect how the plugin works. Now, typically using the WordPress options API, It is quite daunting and quite difficult to comprehend, and to be honest, in my opinion, I don't think the Options API is a very good API at all. It's very confusing to use. So in this case, you have a couple of options. You could use something called Advanced Custom Fields, which is a pro plugin, but I'm intending on helping you do a plugin that you can ship all together in one plugin and not have to rely on anything that requires you to buy the plugin. And in this case, we're going to be using something called Carbon Fields. Now, if you've never heard of Carbon Fields before, Carbon Fields is a free PHP library that you can install into your WordPress plugin that will almost bring you the same functionality that Advanced Custom Fields brings, if not better. Now, if we click on Get Started, what we're going to do is we're going to bring this into our plugin and start creating our options page first. So we'll go to the quick start on the Carbon Field page, and you'll see that you have to require this using Composer. If you're not familiar with what Composer is, it is a PHP, basically a library for PHP scripts that you can install in your own plugin. And it's a dependency manager, so you can essentially install a lot of different libraries, and it keeps track of the versions, and you can update them in a more organized fashion. That's probably not a good example. I've put myself on the spot trying to explain what Composer really does, but in this case, we're going to be using Composer to install Carbon Fields into our plugin, and that's going to bring in all the PHP functionality that we need for this plugin to have an options page. So let's go back into our plugin, and we'll open up the terminal inside of our plugin. And now, before you do this, you need to make sure that you have Composer installed on your actual computer. Now, if you're using a Windows computer, you just need to go to Composer, getcomposer.org, follow the Getting Started prompt, and basically install it on Windows. I'm not going to show you how to do that in this video because I don't want to go on a different track. I just want to be focused on this plugin. So now let's go and paste it in. And this is essentially going to install Carbon Fields library inside our plugin. So whenever our plugin loads, it actually loads the Carbon Fields library, and it's going to be pretty much used only by this plugin. So now that it's installed, you'll see that it's got now a composer.json, which shows that Carbon Fields is there. And it also has a vendor folder, which has all the stuff that we need for Carbon Fields to work. So now what we want to do is we want to actually include that in our plugin. So in our class, I'm going to do a construct method, which essentially runs whenever the class is instantiated. And I'm going to do require once. And now I'm going to use a WordPress function, which is going to get the path of my plugin specifically, which is plugin dir path. And inside there, we add file. So 2 underscores, file, and then another 2 underscores. And this will magically tell the plugin where exactly our plugin path is. And then we're going to point it to the vendor/autoload.php file. So if we go into our vendor folder, and you should see there's an autoload here, which was created by Composer, and that will automatically get everything set up to work, to have any library that's been loaded through Composer to work in our plugin. In this case, just Carbon Fields. So now let's save that, and we'll go back here, we'll refresh. There's no issue. We'll deactivate the plugin, reactivate the plugin. Everything's working perfectly, so there's no problem there. One thing that might come in handy is that we put this plugin path in some sort of constant so that we don't have to keep on typing that throughout our plugin. So we could probably do something like this. So we're going to define a constant in WordPress, and I'm just going to call it my plugin path, and then I'm going to tell it that it is going to be this. And then what we could do on this require once, we could just do my plugin path. All right, let's go back and refresh it and see if there's any issues. No, same thing. Great. Okay, so now that we've got our plugin basically instantiated and we also have carbon fields brought in, let's actually use carbon fields to create this options page. So what we could probably do is I'm going to, just to make sure that not everything goes into the construct method, let's create a new function called, I don't know, maybe initialize. And inside there, this is where we're going to have all our logic. But then what that means is to instantiate the plugin, we want to do maybe contact plugin equals new contact plugin, and then contact plugin initialize. So that's going to create an instance of the plugin and it's going to run the construct and then it's going to run the initialize method, and inside there is where we're going to do everything. Now what I like to do in my plugins is I like to break up functionality. I don't like having too much functionality everywhere, and I think having it all in this initialize function is just going to be too much for us. So let's go and create a folder within our plugin called maybe something like includes. And inside that folder, I'm going to create a file called, maybe I'll just call it utilities. And that is going to be something where I can put any kind of little script in there that will help me throughout the plugin. So let's include that. We'll just do include once, my plugin path includes, and then we'll do utilities.php. So let's include once. All right, so let's go back and see if it causes any issues there. And it does. So it's doing no such file or directory. I'm wondering if I've actually renamed it or I've named it incorrectly. So let's just go to here. And as you can see, this is the problem here. I need to actually put this includes folder in my contact plugin and not outside the contact plugin. All right, so let's do that, refresh it again. Everything should work fine. So now we have the ability to, I don't know, create some sort of utilities in our includes utilities.php file, but also maybe for carbon. So I'm not going to put anything in utilities just yet because I've got nothing that I can think of to put in there. But what I'm also going to do is create another one for, maybe we'll just call it options page. So this is going to be all the settings and all the functionality to make our options page work. So let's go new folder, options, new file, options page.php, and inside there, let's just start up a PHP there. And so what we're going to do is use this particular PHP file for carbon fields. So the first thing we want to do with carbon fields is we need to bring carbon fields into our actual plugin. We need it to boot. So you can follow the instructions on the carbon fields website, but in this case, what you can do is we're going to firstly have to hook into WordPress's hooks system, and we're going to use the hook called the after setup theme hook. Hooks essentially just run when WordPress bootstraps, when WordPress loads. So as a user, when you're going onto a website, behind the scenes on the server, WordPress is bootstrapping or doing a lot of things to actually display the website to you. Hooks essentially load different parts of code throughout the whole bootstrapping process. And in this case, we want to hook in to the after setup theme hook. And we do that by using the add action function on WordPress. And inside there, we want to load carbon fields. So I'm going to create a function called load carbon fields. And let's just create a function there called load carbon fields. And inside this function, we want to then use the boot function or method with carbon fields, which is carbon fields. and then carbon fields again, and then boot. Then we might want to import carbon fields into our actual, actually maybe I could do something like this. So make it carbon fields and then import it. For some reason it's saying the class is not found. So just bear with me 1 second and let's try and figure this one out. I'm going to go to the actual carbon fields website now. Why am I using Edge? I have no idea. We'll go back to carbon fields and we'll go to get started and we'll do a quick start. So we have to include it and then we have to put these in the top of our, okay, so that's the top of our PHP, and then we have after setup theme, CRB load. I don't think the actual function name makes any difference. So let's grab this and put this at the top of our PHP file, and let's go and see if that actually fixes anything. Okay, so we've got class carbon fields not found. We'll go back here and just make sure that everything's loading as needed. Okay, so I know what I've done here. So because we're going to be installing carbon fields into our plugin, we don't want to be using the carbon fields plugin that you plug into WordPress. We want to be using the library, but not the plugin itself. So I'm going to be removing composer remove HTML burger /carbon fields. And then I'm going to be installing composer require HTML burger /carbon fields plugin. And this is going to be bringing in the functionality that we need in our plugin and not actually a plugin that works like a plug. Essentially, we will be bringing a plugin into a plugin, which we don't want to do. Okay, so this is asking, do you trust Composer and Source to execute code and wish to enable it now? Well, I'm just going to put yes. But as you can see, it's brought over carbon fields again. We don't actually want that. So I'm going to remove it again. Okay, let's just remove the whole thing. Let's just remove the whole thing and let's try that one more time. Okay, we're going to reinstall it. And it doesn't look like the carbon fields. So it doesn't look like carbon fields has come in by itself. It's come in through this plugin. Okay, good. So now if we hit save and we go and refresh, you'll notice that it works. Okay, so now that we've actually created a hook called load carbon fields in the after setup theme hook, we then want to set up the actual options page. And to do that with carbon fields, it's very, very easy. So let's create a new function called maybe create options page. And in this options page, because it's going to be like a contact form, maybe let's create a field for who the recipient will be. So to make it easier, to demonstrate to you easier how we're going to do it, we'll just go into Carbon Fields website and let's go and create an options page. So let's just look for options page here. Where are we? Theme options. Okay, and we'll go and copy this here, go into our function and paste it. Now you'll notice that it's saying, it's underlining these. If I'd import the classes, VS Code should automatically tell me what I need. So it's carbon fields container and carbon fields field. We'll go back and we'll refresh our plugin. And still nothing has changed on our end here. So we've created the options page function, but we then need to hook it into an action. So let's do another add action here, and we'll use the hook of carbon fields register fields. So carbon fields register fields. And no, I don't know this off by heart. I've got this off the Carbon Fields website. So you'll find this in their documentation as well. And then we'll just reference our create options page function. So now ideally what should happen is we should see a theme options link on the left-hand side with 2 fields in it. Let's go and refresh. There we go. We have theme options there. And if we click into it, we have these 2 fields that we'll be able to add stuff into. Obviously, we don't want to use Facebook URL and footer text. So let's change that. As you can see, Carbon Fields comes with all these awesome fields that are really simple to make. So in this case, it's going to be a field called, I'll delete this one. We'll call it, well, it's going to be a text field. And then we have to give it a kind of sort of a key, and that's how it's going to store it in WordPress's database. I'm going to call it custom plugin recipients. Custom, oh sorry, what's the name of my plugin again? It is contact plugin. So let's call it contact plugin recipients. And we'll just call it recipient emails, or recipient email. We'll go back and refresh it, and you should see now that we have a field called recipient email. We should be able to easily just go in here and save the changes, and you'll notice that it just works. It's so simple and it works. So now what we can do is we can access this data that we've typed in our plugin to be able to make a form sent to that recipient. But just before I go any further with that, we'll go back to Carbon Fields and we will have a look at the other functionality it has. I might take the opportunity to show you a bit more about this because there's a lot of things it can do. For instance, you could have a media gallery. You could just go in here, copy the media gallery, and then paste it in here. You have to make sure that you put a comma there. And if we just we just save that and we go into our plugin, you'll notice here now we have the ability to easily select attachments from our media gallery. It's amazing. There's nothing in my media gallery here though, so can't really show you how that works. But other things like radio buttons or dates or a color picker and all that sort of stuff, you can make it really, really easily accessible. And maybe for this particular plugin, I'm going to create one called let's do text area. And we're going to make it the confirmation message. So we'll put in a confirmation message. So contact plugin message, and that will be the confirmation message that someone will receive once they've submitted the form. Okay, and there are other things you can do like placeholders and stuff like that. I think maybe we want to put like a little description underneath the email and the confirmation message telling people what it actually will be for. So if we have a look on the documentation here, there should be something called placeholder. Let's have a look and see if we can find it. Well, it's right in front of me, set attribute placeholder. So let's go here, and for the recipient email field, you could just put in, I guess you could just put in, you know, your email.com, and for the message you could put enter confirmation message. But that's actually not what I was referring to. I was referring to a message that can be underneath explaining what the field is about. And in this case, I've just typed in usage attributes, and you can see set help text. So we'll go back to the plugin and we'll just chain it, set help text, and we'll put type the message you want the recipient to submitter to receive. So this would be a message that would be sent to the person who has sent the email through the form. And on here it will be the email that the form is submitted to. So if we go back to the plugin now and refresh it, we should, okay, so it didn't actually come up. So let's go back to our carbon fields again. Field make, add options, set help text. I would have thought that it worked. Maybe it's because I didn't save it. Let's go refresh it again. There we go. So the recipient email is the email that the form is submitted to, and the confirmation message is the message you want the submitter to receive. Cool. All right, so maybe if I'll see if I can format this to make it a bit easier to understand. Because we're chaining it all, it gets a bit messy. Cool, so we've got two fields, and they're stored in the database with these keys, and we can access them with carbon fields using those keys as well. All right, and maybe one last thing we want to do is we want to be able to activate and deactivate the plugin. So we could use something like a checkbox. Let's copy that in carbon fields, and we'll put that at the top. So the order that you put these in will be what they are displayed on the actual front end of the plugin as well. So checkbox is going to be first. I'll make the key contact plugin active, and we'll just make it is active. And I guess set option value, yes. I don't know, maybe I'll just take that out. So let's go and refresh it. You see is active, save changes. Beautiful, okay. So that works. Or you could do the other way. You could do inactive, and you could just make it disabled. So it's going to be disabled if you click the disabled button, and then it won't show up and the plugin won't work essentially. But I might make it the other way, just active, and change that back there. So now we could do, all right, cool. Maybe I'll make it also that we can put like a placeholder in there, so you could actually put the dynamic kind of mail merge thing in there, so it will automatically put their name into there. All right, so we'll leave it like that. Cool. So as you can see, it persists in the database. You can actually change the name of this page from theme options. You can change it to whatever you want. You could change it to, so you got to make sure you keep this here, but you could change it to contact form, or just contact form, I guess. And that's not going to work anymore because I've changed the name of it. So let's go back. We'll go back to the admin, and you should see contact form there. And see how I got this cog? This is like the standard WordPress thing. Maybe let's change the icon. So we can actually assign it through here, which is another chained method called set icon. And then we just put in the icon that we want to use. So if I search, if we go onto the WordPress, so we'll do WordPress -icons. So if we Google that, you should see a list of all the icons we can use. And for a contact form, I mean, I don't know, I'm just going to use this one, which is -icons media text. And we will put that there, save it. It's giving us an error, but hopefully it works. There we go. So yeah, Visual Studio Code isn't 100% with detecting these methods, so that's why it's underlining, but it actually is working. There we go. So we've got contact form, and you can go in there and you can edit the settings for that. Cool. So now what we want to do is we want to maybe create the form so we can display it on our front end. And that's all done in the plugin as well. And to display it on the front end of your website, we're just going to use a shortcode. That shortcode, you can place it anywhere on your website, and it's going to essentially load the contact form. To create our shortcode and our contact form as well, we're going to separate the functionality again in our plugin. To do that, let's just create a new file in our includes folder called contact-form.php. And then we'll load it inside here, inside our initialize function. So it gets loaded after our utilities and our options page. And we'll do contact-form.php there. We'll go into our contact form PHP file and start up our PHP. And first thing we want to do is we want to just add a shortcode. Shortcode will be called contact form, I guess. I'll just leave it as contact. And then we want to reference a function that's going to be a callback. So in this case, we'll just call it create or show contact form. Then we need to create this function. So it will actually run function show contact form. And then here, this is where our form should load. Okay, so let's go and try this out. If we go into our theme and we go onto our pages, go to our home page, and this is using Gutenberg. So hopefully we can make this work. Shortcode, I think, yeah. And then maybe we do contact. Let's update that, go into our home page, and you should see our form should load will come up. Cool, so I'm gonna leave this shortcode here so we can go back to this page and actually refresh and see our contact form coming to life. We'll go back into our editor, and now we want to show our form. Now the form is obviously going to be some HTML with some PHP potentially, and potentially some JavaScript as well. So it might be smarter if we offload this onto another file rather than having it all in this function. So it might be worth creating another folder in our includes folder called templates. And inside there, maybe we could do contact form.php. And now we need to tell our function to actually load that. So to load it in, or load the contact form, I've spelled it incorrectly, so let's just fix that up. To load that, we would want to do an includes, so include, and then we will use the constant that we created here called my plugin path. So my plugin path includes templates, and then contact form.php. And then if we go into our contact form.php and just, I don't know, put something random in there, let's see if it actually works. Oop, yep. So that's working there. That little other piece of text you had there before was a test that I did when I paused because I was having a bit of a problem with my computer. Yeah, so that's all working fine. So now essentially we could do some HTML in there. We could do input type equals text, and maybe a button as well. Submit form. Refresh it, and you should see that that comes through. Now look, this is not going to be a CSS tutorial. I'm going to make the form look as basic as possible and just work so that you don't have to deal with any kind of classes or anything in CSS, okay? So our contact form is going to have a few things in it. So I'm going to create a form, and inside the form, we're going to have a name, email, phone, and a message. But the message will be in the text area. And so this is going to be called the name. This will be called the phone. And this will be called the email. Maybe I'll switch that around. And this will be called, no, there's no type here. This will just name, and then we'll just call message. Okay, so I'm going to separate it by some BRs just to make it look a bit better, but it's not going to look good at all. I'll put a label name. Email, phone, and your message. Might put two breaks between each one. There you go. Okay, so look, I'm not going to win any design awards here, but it's going to work, and you'll get the idea of the core functionality of the plugin. Obviously, give it classes or whatever, and maybe for this, I might just do a break here as well, just so that they are. Don't get me wrong, I know how to use CSS, I just don't want to make it hard for you guys. Okay, cool. So with our form, we want to be able to fill this out. We want to hit the submit form, and what's going to happen is it's going to connect via JavaScript. So we're going to do an AJAX request using the WordPress REST API, and it's going to grab the form data, and then it's going to send it via the WordPress mailer. So if we fill this form out, once we hit submit, we need to tell this form to submit it to the WordPress and a WordPress endpoint, which is the REST API, but we're going to be creating a custom REST API specifically to receive the data and handle this form alone. So let's go back into our plugin and create the endpoint. Before we muck around with this form and make it actually work with JavaScript, let's go back into our contact form.php includes file and create another function which we're going to use to create a custom REST API endpoint. So let's just do set or create REST endpoint. And then we want to create an action. We want to hook into a WordPress action, so add action. And that's going to be, I'm just trying to remember, the REST API init hook in WordPress. So then we're going to use this as the callback. So this function is going to be used to create an endpoint for our form to post to. Then we use a WordPress function called register REST route. And inside there, it accepts a couple of things. The first one is a namespace. So in this case, I like to use with REST stuff, I like to use versions. So I'm just going to do v1 and I'm going to call it contact form. And then I'm going to create the actual, I guess the last part of that URL, which I'll just call as submit. And then we want to create an array. And inside this array, we're going to pass through some options. So it's going to be the method that we want to. So for instance, when we're doing a request from the form, we want it to be a post request. We don't want it to be a GET request or anything like that. So we're going to specifically say that it needs to be a post request to our endpoint. And then there's a callback. So the callback is essentially the function that will handle the data that gets posted to this particular REST endpoint, which I'm going to call it inquiry. So, or handle inquiry. Cool. So this essentially should create that REST endpoint. And then we want to create that handle inquiry function, which is going to handle our data. Okay. Now let's save that, refresh the plugin and make sure that there's no errors. Cool. There's no problems there. So now that we've got this REST endpoint, I'm just going to do echo hello there. Okay. But that's actually not going to do anything because we can't post to that endpoint yet. We need to set up the form to be able to do it. To do that, it's quite easy. We're just going to use jQuery because jQuery is what ships with WordPress. We'll give the form an ID. We'll just call it inquiry form. Then at the bottom here, we'll open up some script tags to do some JavaScript, and we will basically get it ready to work with jQuery. jQuery document ready function, and put a $sign in there so we can use the $sign throughout. And with inside here, we can actually specify what we want to do. So how do we want to do it? When this form is submitted, so we'll do $ inquiry form. So we'll reference this ID dot submit, and the function that we'll create will grab the event as well. And inside here, we should be able to submit it to the REST endpoint. So let's do an alert and just make sure that the form actually submits. Cool. So when we hit submit, it does come up with that alert, but it also submits the page. So we want to stop that functionality from happening. So we'll just do event.prevent default, which will stop that from happening. Okay, and we'll just do an alert again just to see if it works. Cool, so that works. All right. Now, another part of this would be that when we submit it, we need to serialize the data so it goes through to WordPress in a specific way, and then we unserialize it on WordPress's end. So essentially, it's going to put it all in one string, and then WordPress will decode it and maybe convert it into an array to deal with the data that gets submitted. So when the submit form is clicked, we will then, after preventing anything happening to the browser, the standard browser behavior, we want to do an AJAX request by doing a $AJAX. And inside there, let's say, we'll tell it that the type needs to be, it's going to be a post request. And we need to specify the URL that we want it to send to. In this case, the URL is going to be created by WordPress in PHP. So we'll open up a PHP tab and we'll do echo get REST URL. That is actually a WordPress function. And inside there, we want to firstly add I'm just trying to remember, the first argument is blog ID. So I'm just going to put null. I don't think that really matters there. The second one is actually our path or the URL to our REST endpoint. So if you remember, we've got v1 contact form and then submit. So it's going to be v1 contact form, submit. And then the last part of this would be the data. So we need to actually send the data with that request. So we do data, and then we want to grab all the data from this particular form. To do that, we can just set a variable up here called var form. So we'll just call it form, and we'll reference this particular, well, in this case, this references the contents of the form. And then in the data, we'll do form.serialize. That's going to serialize all the data in the form. So if we try that, let's just do alert form.serialize. Refresh, submit. Okay, so that's not working because I've got some sort of error happening in the browser. I'll save that again, I'll refresh it, and I'll see if it works now. So no, there is a small error there. Let's go to our console. You'll see there's an unexpected token. Okay, let's have a look and see what we've done wrong here. Pretty obvious, I can't use that semicolon there. So I'm going to go back here, and I'll actually do console log form serialize. I'll refresh, I'll type some stuff in here. I'll open the inspector and go to the console. If we have a look here, you'll see that it's serialized the data when I've hit the submit form. So that's how the data gets sent through to WordPress. Cool, so that's working fine. Now let's actually see if we get that echo back when we hit submit. Okay, I'm just going to get my inspector up here again and maybe dock it so it's easier. Okay. I'll dock it on the other side. Cool. And we'll have a look specifically at our network tab. So if I type in some information here, hit submit, you should see that there is no error and the preview says hello. So that's actually the response that comes back from our REST API endpoint. Cool. So now we know that it actually works. How are we going to actually handle people from, or potential bots doing, submitting data from a spam bot? We need to protect it, and we can use something called a nonce in WordPress. The nonce stands for number once, I believe, and it's quite easy to set up the nonce on our form. So if we go back into our contact form, and we're going to be using a specific function called, we'll just add it to the top of our form, PHP WP underscore nonce underscore field, and then inside there we'll put WP underscore REST. So that's going to create a nonce specifically for REST endpoints, and it's going to pass it through with the actual form. And then when we grab it from our endpoint, we're going to check if that nonce actually is correct. And if it is correct, then it's going to allow the form to be submitted. If not, it's going to reject it. Okay, so now that we're sure that we're able to receive the data in here, we want to actually get the parameters of the data that's submitted. And to do that, we're just going to set a variable up here, which basically represents the data that gets posted in from this function. So we're going to set the variable called data, and that's going to contain all the data that gets posted through. And then we're going to grab the parameters. So let's just say we'll create a new variable called params equals data get underscore params. So this essentially is going to get all the parameters that were posted through to us from that form. So the first name, the last name, even the nonce. Now with WordPress as well, kind of looking at this data gets really painful. And that's why I use a plugin called Ray. It's by a company called Sparty, and you can, this is something that you buy. I'm going to use it just so you can see how easy it is to debug. But you don't by any means need to actually purchase this plugin, so don't worry about that. But to make Ray actually work in WordPress, I'm going to add the WordPress plugin for it, so Sparty Ray. And I'll just install it. And I'll just quickly activate that as well. And now that it's activated, I can use Ray within here. So I could do Ray params, and it's going to spit everything out into this visual, visually to me, so I can actually see what's happening. All right, so let's go back here, and I'll type in some details. Obviously, email should be an actual email, but it doesn't matter right now. And you'll see that once I hit submit, this is the data that gets posted in the params, okay? You'll notice that it has a WP nonce, it has a WP referrer, name, email, phone, message. Really, we only want this information. We don't want that. But we do want the nonce just to verify that it is a correct nonce. So let's go back into our plugin. And we've got the parameters now. Let's verify the nonce. So we'll do if, and then we want to check if the nonce is not verified. So not verify, WP verify nonce, and then we need to tell it which nonce to check, so the params. And if we look at Ray again, you'll see it's called underscore WP nonce. So we want to verify that against the name, so WP REST, which, as you remember, we used it there. Now, if it is not, if it's not verified, then what we want to do is we just want to return a response. So we'll return a new WP underscore REST response, and we'll just put, I don't know, maybe we'll put something like message not sent. And then we'll also return the HTTP code that we want to send back. In this case, I'll do 422. Now 422 I think is invalid request or not authorized request, but you could use whatever code you want to use there. So let's go here Actually, we'll go back into our contact form and we'll take away the nonce field. We'll refresh, okay, and we'll try and fill it out. And we'll hit submit, and you should see that the message was not sent because the nonce was not sent with it. We'll put the nonce back in there, and I'll put echo message. Actually, we'll just create another response if it works. 200 response, message sent. Refresh it again, do the same thing, hit submit. Beautiful, the message is sent because the nonce was right. Obviously, this isn't foolproof. Someone could just literally go on there and hit submit a million times, but I don't think you can really protect that. We could probably do some reCAPTCHA integration, which I could probably show you to do in maybe another video, an extension to this video, but to keep things simple, we're not going to do that right now. Cool, so we have the parameters, we've verified that the nonce is actually valid. So now what we can do is just get rid of those other things that we don't need, which is WP nonce and WP HTTP referrer. So to do that, just do unset params underscore WP nonce, and same thing for unset params and then underscore WP HTTP referrer. So now if I say do array on the params, again, refresh, clear my history, try it again, we should only get, hopefully, actually no, we'll check array, we should only get the data we need, which is a name, email, phone, message, which then we could maybe do a for each loop on, and so it's dynamic. When you need to add a new field to the contact form, you can just do it on the contact form itself, and it will automatically be added in the confirmation email that gets sent. Cool, so now that we have the parameters that we need, then what we want to do is actually send the email message. So to send the email message, we can use WordPress's WP mail function. So to do that, let's firstly create some headers for our email, and we'll create that as an empty array. And then what we want to do is set the from email address, and we can add that into our headers array by doing headers equals, and then from, then we can put the email address. So if I am correct, in our plugin, if we go to our contact form settings, we've got recipient email. So that's, well, that is going to be the recipient that sends the email. So you want to put the email of the person that has actually sent the email. In this case, it's going to be params email, because that is the email address of the person that submitted the form. But I've also found with WordPress, if you're actually sending an email from the person who has submitted the form, it can typically go to the spam folder, because it's essentially your website trying to pretend that you're that person sending an email as them. So I would probably recommend that you don't use the customer's email in this case. You'd probably want to put it in another part, which is the reply to, and that will actually have their email address, which you would put in these arrows left and right, and then you can also put their name, which is also in the parameters here. And then the from, you could probably use the WordPress admin email address, for instance, which I believe is, let's just do it here. Actually, maybe I'll do it in this way, from get blog info. You know what, we'll do it a different way. Sorry, I keep chopping and changing here. We'll assign a variable first, so we'll just do sender equals get blog info admin email. So that's actually going to get the email address from the settings general from here. So it's actually going to grab it dynamically from there. And then we'll do the same thing. So we'll do sender name equals get blog info. Maybe we'll just use the name of the website. And then we'll put sender name and maybe change that to sender email. Sender email. And put it within those arrows as well. Cool, so we've set the from, so who's sending the email. We're also setting the person who has sent the email, we've put them in the reply to. And don't forget, this email is actually going to the administrator of the website. So the administrator ideally will want to hit the reply button and to reply to the customer and not to, or the person who submitted the form, and not themselves or the website admin email. And I need to take out this. I'm too used to doing double handlebars. There we go. Cool. So that should work now. Then let's set our message. So we'll do message equals, and we'll just make that blank. And then we'll add to the message by concatenating onto it. So we'll do message dot equals message has been received by, and then let's just add in, actually I'll do inverted commas here. Sorry, message has been sent from, and then put the person who has sent the message in the form, their name there. Then we want to actually get all the data that's been submitted by the form. So you could hard code it in there, but in this case, because the data is in an array, we could just go through it. So for each params as, and then we want to separate the label with the value. So the label and then the value. So let's do as label value. And inside there, let's just concatenate onto the message the label and the value. So let's do, maybe we'll do a capitalization of the label so it's not all lowercase. So we'll do UC first, label, and then we will join the value with that. So maybe join it with a colon and then value. Maybe we'll put a break here as well. And then we want to obviously hook into WP Mail. So we want WordPress to actually send the email, and we use that by using WP Mail. So we can do WP Mail. We want to firstly put the recipient, which the recipient would be, I'm guessing, the administrator of the actual website. So in that case, we could, actually, I'll change this to admin email and admin name. Admin email and admin name. There we go. And we'll do the same thing. We'll put to admin email. So that's the to address. And then the subject of the email, which I haven't actually done. So let's just put a subject there and just go new inquiry from params name. So that's just getting the name from the form again. So that's the subject, and then the message, of course. So we'll just add the message in there. And then we also want to include these headers as well. So we'll do headers. So technically this should work. We'll also just do a return response. So we'll just return the response here. We'll make it a code of 200, and we'll just say the message was sent. Okay, so let's give this a go. Now to test it, because I'm on the local machine, I've got something called MailHog installed. I'm just going to install MailHog WordPress plugin to allow it to go to MailHog. If you don't know what MailHog is, it's just basically it just catches the emails that get sent. So it's just going to be sending it to like a makeup mailbox on my computer, which is here. It's a web-based thing, and it should at least allow me to test to see if the email arrives. So MailHog for WordPress, I'll install it. That's just for WordPress to work with WordPress, but you actually need to install MailHog on your PC as well. I might do another video for that. We'll activate that. And now let's go and test this form. Let's fill this out. Submit the form, and there you go. So as you can see, WP Mail has worked. An inquiry has come through, and it's come through like this. We don't really want it to come through like that. We want it to come through in HTML. So we need to change the way that it's sent through. It's being sent through as plain text right now. So we'll go back into our plugin and we'll see what we can do to change that. We just need to add into the headers here. So add another argument here. Argument or array. And we'll do content type text/HTML. So now that should make it come in HTML instead of plain text. So refresh, let's try that again. I'll go into MailHog. It's come through there. Oops, that might be the wrong one. Okay, it looks like it's the same. Well, it is different now because it is actually HTML. So let's clean it up a bit. We'll put a break after the label and value, and we'll also put an H1 tag here. Obviously this is still very poorly designed. You could change it to whatever you want. Go back here and fill this out. Go back into MailHog, refresh it. And you should see that now it kind of looks half decent. Maybe we'll put some strong tags here just to differentiate between the label and the value. Oops. Refresh it again, go to MailHog, check it out. There we go. There's a massive amount of space between the H1 as well. I'll delete all the messages, and this should be the last test. Cool. Okay, so our messages come through. It's still a bit dodgy there. So yeah, that should fix it now. So now that we're able to receive the information from the form via email, we might want to actually store that data in WordPress as well. So to do that, we're going to utilize something called custom post types. But before I do that, I'm just going to make this form give some feedback if there is actually an error or if the email has actually been sent. We can utilize the functions of AJAX, the success function and the error callback, the success callback and the error callback. Now, if there is a successful submission, we can make it do one thing, and if there's an error, we can make it do another. So after data, let's just do success function, and inside there, we'll do whatever we want. And after success, we will do error function. Inside the success, we basically want to hide the form. So we've already specified what form variable is. So we could just do, say, form.hide. And then we might want to create a message. So let's go and create a message at the top here. We'll just call it div ID equals inquiry, or maybe form success. We'll also call one called form error. And then what we'll do is, after hiding the form, actually we need to put these outside of the form. We can't put them inside, otherwise it's going to hide them as well. So after we actually hide the form, we want the successful message to come up. So we'll target that. and the success message is form success. So let's go up here and do form success, and we'll add some HTML to it, which will be your message was sent, and we'll fade it in. We'll just use some jQuery stuff. With error, we'll use the form error div, and we'll say your message was, or there was an error submitting your form. So maybe this success, you might want to give it a style or background. I'm just going to do some really basic ones. Background green, color white, and this one will be background red, color white. Cool. So let's try this out. Fill this out, submit the form, and nothing has actually happened. So what's happened here? We'll go to the console, see if there's any errors. There is an error. It says it says the message has been sent, which is cool. Okay, so let's refresh it again. I'm just going to try it one more time. So the form is actually hiding, but it looks like our form success message is not doing anything. So we'll just, yes, I've got to put a hash in front of there, of course, because it's an ID. Do it again. Good, your message was sent. Now let's try and make an error here, for instance. Let's just do that, just take away something there. Okay, no, that's going to completely stuff up the code. I'm just going to move this here. So it's automatically going to respond a 422, which AJAX should classify as an error. Let's try it again. Cool, there was an error submitting your form. What we can do is with this success function, we can actually grab the response and then use the response from the server as the message. So let's go back into our plugin and maybe change the response to the message was sent successfully, just so we can differentiate from what it is currently. We'll refresh it and let's type in something, submit it. The message was sent successfully. Fortunately, we can't really do it with the error. So the error is just coded into jQuery to say that. So you can just change it to whatever you want. Cool. So now that we've got the basics of this form submission done, what we want to do now is we want to grab the data from the actual form, and when it's submitted, go into the back end of your website, maybe to another thing called submissions, which you can click on and you can see all the submissions sorted by date. To save the submissions in the back end of the website or in the database, we're going to be using a custom post type. And the custom post type is going to be something that gets created by our plugin. So when the plugin is activated, it will automatically display on the left-hand side. So to create a custom post type, we should go into, we'll go into our contact-form includes file because it's related to the contact form, and we're going to hook into the init hook for WordPress. So when the init hook fires in the WordPress bootstrapping process, we will then use a callback function, which we'll just call it create submissions page, and then we'll go down and create this. I'll just create the function here. Function create submissions page, and inside there we want to use a WordPress function called register post type, and inside there we're going to be putting some arguments. So I'll create a variable called AJAX, and inside that variable we'll make it an array, and then we'll add some properties. So the first thing will be that it's going to be public. Actually, I'm not sure. We'll see if it's going to be public. We'll see what the difference is. We're definitely going to have an archive. So we want to have an archive of all the submissions. So that means it's going to be more like a post rather than a page. In WordPress, a post is a certain type of post type, and a page is a certain type of post type. If it has an archive, it's going to be similar to how posts work. And then we're going to make, we're going to set some labels for this post type. So we'll just do an array there. The name of the post type will be submissions, and then the singular name will just be submission. So I'll just do that for now, and then inject those arguments, or the argument, into register post type, and that should work now. So we'll go back into the plugin, refresh, and we have an error on line 19. So let's have a look. What have I done wrong here? Well, yeah, I can't use a semicolon within an array. We'll go back, refresh it again, and then you should see, well, you should see submissions, but it's not displaying. So what have I done wrong? Okay, and that's my bad. What we have to actually do when we're creating register post type, you need to set the post type here. So in this case, I'm going to use the singular name, which will be submission, and then comma, and then the arguments with that post type name that we're going to set. So I'll save that now and hit refresh. And now you should see submissions on the left-hand side. So let's go and disable the plugin. Okay, there's no more submissions and there's no more contact options, but if we activate it, you then see submissions and contact form there. So if we click into submissions, there is an add new feature. We probably don't need to have add new because it's not going to be submitted through the back end. It's only going to be submitted on the front end through that form. So what we can do is, if we go back into our code, we're going to add a couple of capabilities to this particular post type. The first will be the capability type, and we're just going to put post. Then we're going to put the capabilities that are available for this post type. So capability, and then we'll open up an array. I'll just do the old school array, just so it is a bit, actually no, let's do the normal one. And then we'll do create posts, false, and then we will do, I think that should be it. So let's save that and refresh it. Okay, no, that's still not working. Just looking at some documentation, all we need to do is we need to take away this. So it's changed a bit from the past. Capabilities, and then inside the array, create posts, do not allow. And that's going to disable you from being able to, as you can see, add new posts. So if I take that out and I refresh it, or if I add it in, the add new button should be removed. Cool. All right, so that kind of disables that, which is quite important. I mean, it would be silly to have the ability to add submissions that are supposed to be coming from the front end to the back end. Okay, so we have our custom post type. So now what we have to do is, when the form is actually submitted, during that process of sending the email, we also want to store it in the submissions custom post type. Let's go back into our code, and we're going to look for the handle inquiry function. So essentially the function that runs when the form is submitted successfully. And we have this function which is sending the email. So maybe we want to store it in the database before it gets sent via email. And that's maybe also a failsafe. So if someone submits the form, it will still be submitted in the database, even if the email has an issue and doesn't send, for instance. Okay, so before the WP mail function, we're going to use another function called WP insert post. And it accepts a couple of arguments, but the first argument is an array. So let's just create an array here called AJAX, and maybe I'll call it actually looking at the WordPress docs, we'll just call it post array. You don't have to call it that, but just to be in line with the docs. And the main things that we are going to set would be probably the title of the post and also the content. But coming to think about it, we're not really going to be storing any of the data that's posted from the form inside the content of the post or even the title. We're really going to be assigning custom fields or custom meta to that post so we can then display the data on the custom post type. So coming to think about it, let's just try this and see what happens when we just do WP insert post. I'll just go into the plugin, we'll refresh the page, we'll type some details in here, hit submit, and it says there was an error submitting the form. So if I go into our network tab and have a look, too many few arguments to WP insert post. Okay, so maybe if we let's just put a blank array in there and see what happens then. Okay, so the message was sent successfully. Let's go into our WordPress submissions page and hit refresh, and nothing's happened. And that's most likely because we put a blank array and we didn't actually put any content or anything like that. So I'm just going to create this again. And inside here, let's just put the name of the person who's made the inquiry on the form as the title of the inquiry. So post title equals params name. Okay, everything else like the ID, post author, there's a ton of parameters. So if you have a look here, we've got a ton of things that we can actually put into that array. I don't think we are necessarily going to use them. We just want it to auto-generate an ID and maybe a post title. So let's try that, and we'll put the post array in the argument. I'll go here again and I'll refresh the page and just type whatever in here, hit submit form. It was successful, but it still didn't go in there. And I know why, because it's going to our posts post type rather than our custom post type. So I'm going to just delete that out of our posts, go back to our submissions. It's still empty, of course. We'll go back here, and now we have to just set what post type we want to it to save into, which is fairly easy. We just do post type, and we're just going to refer to the post type that we created, and it's called submission. Oops. There we go. So let's go back here, and I'm just going to fill out some details. And submit. It was sent. Then we go to submissions, and we should see that it's in here. So we can then, so we've got a bit of a problem there. We can't actually click on it. So that could be potentially the issue that relates from us stopping the form from being edited. So create post do not allow. I'm just going to deactivate that for now, just so we can get this working. So there it goes, it's available again. We'll click into the name or into the inquiry, and you should see my name as the title, and then there's no content. So that's fine. What we could do really is we could just use post content. So just this box here to store the inquiry details, but it doesn't make much sense. It'd be probably better to have them stored in some sort of table here, and even remove this functionality completely, because you don't really need this on an inquiry form, and you don't need to publish an inquiry form either. But we'll get to that soon. So let's go back here. We've created this post, so I'm going to assign a variable to this, and we're just going to call it post ID equals So this function, the WP insert post function, is automatically going to return the ID of the new post if it gets created successfully. So now that we've got the ID of the post, we then want to assign some metadata to that post, which would be the fields in the form. So as you can see, we've got for each params as label value. So rather than doing another for each loop, we could probably just copy this, put this above the for each loop, okay, and then do it here, which would be add post meta. The first argument is the post ID, and then we want to put in the key. So the key would be this label here, and the value would be value. Okay, so let's go back here. I'll go back to the submissions index. Let's just delete that one to keep things simple. Refresh this page. I'll just type some gibberish in here. Submit the form. Refresh it. We should still see this inquiry. If we click into it, it's still blank. But what we could probably do is have a look at the custom fields that are associated with this. And I think they may be disabled in the custom post type. So we just need to enable them by going back into our custom post type and adding a supports option. Open it up in an array and add custom fields into there. So let's go here, refresh it, and now you should see that the custom, now first of all, the content editor that we saw before has been removed, because now our custom post type is only accepting custom fields. But we can obviously, accept the title, and we can also accept the what is the name of it, editor. Save that, refresh it, you should see it's all back, but we don't need that. So let's just remove that. All we need is the custom fields right now. Obviously it's not going to look like that because we're going to make it prettier than that. But as you can see, the data that was submitted was successfully sent through. The name, the phone, the message, and the email. So this isn't pretty though. This isn't something that you don't want to be able to delete the data. You don't want to be able to update it. I mean, if you do, fine, that's cool. But really, it would be good to just show the data that can't be edited. So let's just go back to our code, and we're going to figure out a way to create a meta box on the custom post type to display that data. Okay, so let's go and hook in to another function, or another hook, sorry. Add action, and it's going to be add meta boxes. And a meta box is essentially a box that you can add into one of your pages or post types, and you can control what is in there. And in this case, we're going to put the custom field data in there and display it however we'd like to. So add meta boxes, and the callback function, I think we'll just call it create meta box. We'll go down here, function, create meta box. And inside there, we want to basically run a function called add meta box inside this function. So let's give this a go. Add meta box. The first argument to that function would be a unique ID. So I'm just going to call it custom contact form. The second argument is the title. So let's just say submission, I guess. The third argument is the callback. So the callback would be another function which that will use to display the content of that meta box. So let's just say display submission. And the third one, the fourth one would be the actual screen that it's supposed to come up on. And in this case, it's the post type. So if you remember, our post type is called submission. So we'll just use that again. So this is our callback, display submission. Let's go there and we'll create a function called function display submission. And let's try and echo something. We'll just say hello. All right, let's go back into our submissions and we should see a new meta box down there called submission and then hello in there. And as you can see, it looks like native WordPress. So you don't have to do any styling or anything like that. But we just need to get rid of custom fields. That just looks ugly. So let's just go back into options to our contact form.php and just remove supports completely. I'll just comment that out actually. Refresh it and now you'll see the title and the content. So let's just do supports and then make it a blank array. I think that's how it's going to work. No, that's not going to work. All right. Let's just have a look. I'm just going to refer to the, maybe we can do supports false. Let's try that. Okay, cool. That works. Fantastic. So nothing is supported. And you can see the submission which says hello there, which is fine, but we don't want to say hello. We actually want to show the data, the metadata of this post. Okay, so let's go back into our function which handles the content of the meta box. And we just want to grab all the meta all the post meta that's associated with this particular submission and show it on the screen. So you could just like hard code it. You could basically do something like, name and then put the code here for name and then email, put the code here for email. But I think just to keep it fluid, and if you updated the form and added an extra field, you might want to just loop through the custom meta. So to do that, we'll just do post meta as a variable, or post metas, plural, and then we're going to do get post meta, and we need to get the ID of the actual submission. So how are we going to actually get the ID of the current submission? We may not, so I'll just see if it actually works without it, and then we'll do a for each post metas as meta, and then we'll do echo. Maybe we'll do, so for each post metas as key value. I'm just going to do key value. Don't worry about that. Take away this underscore here as well. And we'll do echo key and then colon and then value. So this should work. It should get all the meta that's associated with that post and just put it on the screen. Okay, now that doesn't work. So get post meta it's looking for something. So which would most likely be the ID. Let's just have a look here. Yeah, so it needs the post ID. To get the post ID of the current post that you're on, all you have to do is do a function called get_the_ID. And because it's only going to be loading in that submissions post type, it's going to run this, get the ID of the custom post type, and it's going to get the meta for that specific page we're in. Okay, let's refresh it again. Okay, great. So that's kind of working, but not. It's showing an array. So let's have a look and see why that's coming up. And that's why this array program that I'm using is fantastic, because it will spit out to me without me needing to do any var dump or anything like that. We'll refresh it again. And if I go into array, you should see that it's coming up with a reference, like a key, most likely to a piece of array data. Let's go back here, and maybe we should do, if it's an array, let's try and see 0 and see if that actually does anything. Fantastic. Okay, so the data is there now. Now let's just obviously pretty it up a tiny bit. Maybe I will do a unordered list. And I'll remove that array and refresh it. And there we go. And you'll see it's got edit lock there. We don't want that. So maybe we have to do the hard coding like we were going to do, or we could just unset that specific meta key. I'll just make this bold and just separate it a bit more. Kind of do what we did with the email. We'll do UC first for the key. Great, so that works. And maybe the message, if the message is going to be quite long, actually we could probably put a break after the label. So there's just a space afterwards. Or a return, sorry. There we go. Okay, now we want to remove edit lock. I'm assuming edit lock is the only thing that will come through onto there. So let's go here and we'll just do unset post metas edit lock. Let's see if that works. Cool, so that works. The other way I mentioned by hard coding it, I'll show you how to do that as well, just in case you don't want to do the for each loop. So let's go back in here and just outside of the loop, let's just say we wanted a hard code name. We could do name and then PHP echo get post meta, get the ID of the actual page, and then pass through the key. So the key would be name, and then true. It's a single, true is referencing whether it is a single value or if it's kind of like an array or something like that. But in this case, it's just a string. So it's just a single value, and that should actually come up as well. No, all right, what have I done wrong here? Echo get post meta, get the ID, name true. Kind of looks right, but sure. Oh, what have I done here? I'm doing PHP. I'm doing a different type of PHP. Let's just let's just forget you saw that. All right, we're just going to do echo name, and then we'll get that, concatenate it, and do that. Take away the for each loop. Even take away the unset, just so you can see that it actually works. There you go. So you can also do it that way, and that just means that you have more control over how things look. If you wanted to make a specific field look larger in text than the other fields, you can do that. But in this case, to make it simple, I'm just going to do that. And by doing it like that again, means that, let's just say we go into our form. Where's our form again? Contact form here, and we want to add another field. So let's just say alternative email, and I'll just call it alt email, or yeah, I'll just do alt email for instance. And then we go on the front end and we fill it out. And we go into our submissions. You'll see that the alt email will automatically come up there without you needing to do any programming on the receiving end of that. And that's why that's powerful. I'm going to remove that anyway, just so we don't have too many fields. Okay, so just going back to what we did, we have inquiries that are coming through, and they're coming through in draft mode. So let's take that away. Let's make that published. We do not want it to be in draft mode. I guess it just looks silly in draft mode. So we'll go back to where we insert the actual post, or we create the post initially. We'll go and add post status, And I think it might be just publish. All right, so let's go here, fill it out again. Go to submissions. There we go. There's our submission there. Click into it and it is showing everything how we need it to. So now I think I'm going to focus on just taking away the ability to edit a post and update a post. We don't want to do that. After doing a bit of Googling, I'm going to reinstate what I did before, which is, let's paste it in. Capability type is post, capabilities create posts false, and map meta cap. So we set that to false if users are not allowed to actually edit the posts. So if I do false here, let's go back in here, refresh it. You should see that no longer will someone be an admin be able to actually even look at it in the back end. It will take them to a front end. So we definitely want that to be true. I think it might even be true by default. So let's just remove that. But we definitely want to have capability type post and then capabilities as an array and then create posts false. So we don't want people to be able to create posts. But it looks like there is some sort of, actually, yeah, it isn't default. We have to keep that there. All right. Refresh it again. So you can trash it. You can view it on the front end. So there's a front end thing, which I might see if I can remove that. If we edit it, you'll see that you can't change anything, but you do have the ability to update it. But the update really does nothing. I think there is a limitation with custom post types to be able to hide the update button. And you may very well have to do it using, CSS or JavaScript and just hiding it based on the custom post type. So I'm not going to worry too much about that. If you're using this on your own website, you can sit here all day long and hit update if you want to. Good on you, but I don't have time for that. One thing just before we go any further, you'll see that edit last has come up, and that's something that WordPress has added into the meta of this particular post. So it could very well be worth doing the hard coding of each field as opposed to doing a for each loop. So yeah, I think maybe it would be a good idea. So let's just maybe try and remove this. Sorry, it's not here. It's in our custom meta box. There we go. All right, so forget about unsetting everything. I'll just comment that out just in case you want to do it like that. And then we'll just do the same sort of thing without the for each loop. And the first one is going to be the name. So make that name. And this will be get post meta, get the ID, name, and true, because it's a singular string. Copy that a few times. We'll do email, phone, and message. Save it. Let's have a look. Should all still look the same, but obviously what's happened there? I'm using the colons twice. I'm sorry. As you can see, it's 2:14 in the morning right now, so I'm not at, my brain is not at full capacity. Okay, so we have the data saved in there. And if we go to submissions, the submissions come up. I'm going to trash these drafts because they just look ugly. Cool, so let's go and fill out another form and submit it. Go in there, click on submissions, and it will come up there. And if we go into MailHog as well, all those submissions are coming through via email. So don't get turned off by this. This is just capturing the email before it sends traditionally. So if you're using a plugin like WP SMTP or anything like that that's sending the email, it's going to send the same way because it's going through the WP send mail function. So looking back at our submissions page, this, it's not that nice. I mean, we've got the name of the person that's made the submission and we've got the date. We can click into it, that's fine, and we can see the submission. But really, wouldn't it be good to have their name, email, phone in separate columns on the table of the custom post type so we can easily see a bit more about the person without having to click into it? You could even show the message here as well. So to do that, we need to take advantage of a filter called post or manage post columns. So it's a 3-4 step process, but I'll show you how to do it. So let's go back in here. And I'm going to go to the top of our page, and what I want to do firstly is create a filter. So add filter. This will be called manage, and now this is where you put the actual post type name. So submission in our case, but I'll just leave it like that for now. Posts columns. So this is like a dynamic filter that WordPress recognizes once you put in the actual post type name. In this case, it's called submission because if you remember, the name of our post type is called submission. So let's paste it in there. And then we want to just get a callback function, and I'm just going to call it custom submission columns. We'll create a function called custom submission columns. And inside there, it takes, so this filter actually injects an array of the actual existing columns on the table when it loads. So if I use that program called Ray, and I'm going to just clear it so it's blank, okay, and go back into here and hit refresh, you'll see that we actually have a problem because we haven't returned those columns back through that function. So it's just going to stuff up here, okay? But if we go back to our code and then do return columns, it's all going to work as normal. But then if we look at Ray, you'll see that these are the types of fields that are being passed in. So the checkbox, which is just this, the title, and the date. Okay, so let's edit them. Because with filters, we can actually edit something and then we can return it again. So let's just recreate that columns array and add in our own custom columns. So we need to keep I would want to keep the checkbox there. So we can just do CB and refer to the CB, which we saw, the checkbox, which I think it stands for. We just basically copy this, but instead of doing that, we'll just do columns CB. And then we will, let's just put a name and we'll call it name. We'll also title, and I'm not doing this with translations. I mean, what you could do is you could do, not title, my bad, sorry, it's supposed to be email. With translations, you could do this and then put your text domain. So what we had here, which is options plugin. And that helps with translations if you ever want to do it. So I'm just going to do it anyway. Name. I don't know why I called it options plugin. It should be contact plugin, all right? Call that contact plugin. And then we'll do phone. And just for, just to put it all there, we'll put the message as well. So message, and we'll name it message. So this is like the kind of key, and this is what the actual column shows. So the key is used more for matching up the rows, which I'll show you how to do now. But let's go and refresh. We should have columns now: name, email, phone, message. but it's all blank, right? Because we need to still create the functionality for each individual row to get the metadata for each post. Go back into our code, create another, well, it's not a filter this time, it's an action. So add action, and we're going to hook into the manage, and then again, the post type, posts custom column. That's the dynamic function. We just need to replace this with our post type name, which is submission. And then let's, I don't know, create fill, we'll call it fill custom post type. Actually, fill submission columns. I'm very bad with naming things. And we'll create a function called function fill submission columns. And inside there, we then want to do, we want to receive an injection of some variables which come with this particular dynamic action, which the first argument would be the column, and the second one is the actual post ID, which is really handy. Now what we can do is we can do a switch statement on the column so that we know if the column is for the name, then we want to show the meta for the name. If it's for the email, we'll show it for the email. So we'll do a switch statement on the column. We could always do an if statement if you want to, but switch is faster generally. And then we'll do case. So if the column is called name, which is referred to by this, then we want to echo get post meta. Remember, we've got the post ID now, so we can just pass that in. And then our key, which is name, and then true, because it's a singular item. So we'll save that. Go here, and there is an issue here with too few arguments, fill submission columns. So what have I done here? Looking at some documentation, the fill submission columns function or action needs to be placed after all the other columns have loaded. So we can do a priority for our action. So it loads after everything else has loaded. We'll go back to our action and we'll add the third argument, which will be 10. So we're going to be the priority of 10, which will load essentially after WordPress natively loads its columns and all that sort of stuff. And then we also need to add in how many arguments this particular action accepts, which in this case is 2. So 10, 2. All right, let's go back here, refresh. Fantastic, we have the name. Now we could just kind of copy this. Email. I really got to be a bit more efficient with this. Here we go. Phone and message. All right, let's have a look here now. Refresh. Awesome. So now we have the name, email, phone, message. We can obviously click into it if we want to, but there's kind of no point now because we've got it all on the table. All right, so let's try and say search for something. Let's search for this email. Okay, the search doesn't seem to be working. So I will try and type in something that is a bit different to the other messages. Go to submissions. I should be there. So if I type in Sean, for instance, okay, it worked. Now the reason why it worked is because when we created the post, it injected the name of the person into the title of the post, which, you know, that's cool. But what if we want to search by email? Let's do sean@mrdigital.com.au. It's actually not going to work. Now it's a bit more complicated to make it work, but I did some Googling. And I mean, the reason why it's more complicated is because it's got a bit of mucking around with the query. But I'm going to use what I did in what I found online in the plugin so you can see how it works. So we're going to use a add an action, and we're going to hook into the init action again, and we'll create a callback. So let's just call it setup search. Okay, function setup search. And basically we're going to be hooking, from what I read online, is we're going to be hooking into the actual so we're going to basically tell it what submission type it is. So sorry, what post type it is that we're going to be searching for. So we're going to create a global, and we're going to call it type. And then we're going to do if type, if the search type or the custom post type that we're searching is a submission, then add filter posts search. So we're going to be filtering the posts search, and I'll put posts search, actually submission search override, and then again we're going to do the priority of 10 and the arguments of 2. Okay, then we're going to create this callback function, and inside there we're going to receive the injected variables, which would be the search and the query. And then we just have to do a few things which I prefer not to type out, so I'm just going to copy and paste it. And you can get this from the GitHub repo. Basically, it creates a global variable called WPDB, which allows it basically to do an SQL query or a SQL query, however you want to say it. And it allows us to hook into the query and add our meta keys in there, which in this case are name, email, and phone. I didn't put message in there, but we could very well put message in there if you want to. You just don't want messing too much with it. So actually I'll leave it out. And what this should do now is this should actually, when we're doing a search on the submissions post type, which is set up here, it should automatically hook into it and change the query so that it looks for those items. All right, so let's try and look for Sean. Remember, Sean did work before, right? But the email didn't work. So let's try, let me just go back to this page. We'll do sean@mrdigital.com.au. And that didn't work either. I'm just looking at the documentation again, and the global, they've put it as type now. So I'm not sure if that has any benefit, but we'll just change that to type now. And we'll do sean@mrdigital.com.au. And that still did not work. So what am I doing wrong here? And going through the documentation again, or just the copy and paste of the code, we are meant to do it on admin init, not on the init function. So it will only work in the admin. We'll save that. Let's try again. Let's go here and we'll do sean@mrdigital.com.au, and you'll see that we can now search email. Let's try and search for the phone number. Go back and search for the phone number. Fantastic. So now we can actually search via name, email, and phone as well. Now that everything is working as expected, so people can fill out the form, it saves in the database, and it also sends an email, maybe we want to look at prettying up the form. But I'm not going to be doing any CSS. I'm only going to show you how to enqueue a CSS file or a style sheet into your plugin so that you can edit it yourself. If we go back into our plugin, what we want to do is we want to add an action. So we're going to do it in the contact form.php file as well. We'll do add an action called WP Enqueue scripts, and we're going to use a callback function called Enqueue custom scripts. You can enqueue style sheets, you can enqueue JavaScript as well. And the function will be obviously enqueue custom scripts. And then we'll use a function in WordPress called WP Enqueue style, which accepts the name. So I'm going to call it a custom name. We'll just call it contact form plugin. That's the name of the style sheet. And then we're going to tell it what the URL is of the style sheet. So whilst I had this video paused, I actually went and created a folder called assets and CSS and created a contact-plugin CSS file. So we basically have to tell the WP Enqueue style function where it is, but it needs to be relative to the plugin. Okay, so remember we had a constant called my plugin path. This won't work. The reason why it doesn't work is because it's actually giving the absolute path. Like, you know, for instance, on my computer, it's C drive / Laragon / plugins, whatever. We want it to actually have the proper URL for the browser so that style sheet can load it. So you can't use that, but you can use a handy function from WordPress, which is called plugin dir URL. And then we want to pass in this magic, I think it's called a magic method. Basically, this will just get the name of the file, which is contact-form.php, put it into this, and it's automatically going to know where you are. But we'll use that, and then we're going to point it to the CSS file. So assets, CSS, and then contact plugin.css. And that's pretty much all we're going to need. In my CSS file, I've created a body black, so we'll know it's going to work if the body changes to black. Let's just go here, refresh it, and no, it's not working. If we have a look at the actual source, you'll see that it's trying to load it, but it's loading it from the includes folder. Why is it doing that? Well, we're actually running this code in a file which is in the includes folder. So we can't do that. Now, unless we want to do something, you know, bring this back into the main plugin folder, because that's within the base of the plugin, we need to do something different. So what we can do is we can define another constant and call it my plugin URL. So it creates this constant from the base, and we'll use plugin dir URL instead. And now this constant should be accessible from here. And now I'll just clean this up a bit. Now it should actually work. There we go, fantastic. So we can actually access the base URL for the plugin in a separate file in our plugin. Fantastic, so that works as well. So there you go. You can now go and target the styles of your form here and make that look as pretty as you'd like, but I'm not going to waste your time doing a CSS tutorial. Before I finish up with this tutorial, I want to run through a couple of things, and things which I didn't really address during the initial building of this form, is that you may want to do some sort of validation on your actual plugin. So let's go back into our contact form.php, and we'll go to the REST API handler that's handling the form data that gets posted. You're also going to want to most likely sanitize the data. Sanitizing just makes sure that no one can post data that could be potentially harmful to your database, especially if you're saving the data in the database. Right now it's not really checking that. If we go onto WordPress sanitize data, I'll sanitize, we'll see what we can actually use to sanitize. So in this case, we can escape the HTML when we're displaying it on our meter boxes. So that's one step of it. let's just go here and go to our custom meta box. Where is our custom meta box? Maybe I'll just search for it here. There we go. So might be worth doing something like this. Escape the HTML. And if there are any nasties, any JavaScript or anything that's been posted, that should automatically get rid of that. I'm just going to remove that CSS from there because that's annoying. Okay, we'll go back to our submissions and we'll go to any of these submissions, and you should see that they're still looking normal. But if I, for instance, did something like script alert hi, so post some JavaScript through, it still accepts it, right? But then if we go into our submissions, it's actually coming up still. But it doesn't come up there. It's coming up on our table page. That's because we didn't escape that data in the actual table columns either. So I just need to do the same thing there. So this is why you need to be extremely careful with forms when they're submitted to make sure that they are protected or sanitized. So that's one part. You're protecting, so technically the data still stored in the database is that JavaScript. We don't want that JavaScript to come in at all. We want it to be stripped or sanitized before it reaches the database. So let's go back. Go back to our REST API endpoint. REST endpoint. No, not the endpoint, sorry. The handle inquiry function. And all the parameters that are being saved in the database here, the value, need to be changed or need to be altered. So we can just do sanitize text field, assuming it is a text field, because there are other other ways you can sanitize. As you can see here, you can do sanitize email as well, but I'm going to do sanitize text field and save that. And then I will refresh this again and maybe go to the front end and type some stuff in here. And I'll do this script again. And we'll submit that. Go back to submissions. And you'll notice that the whole thing got stripped. So it didn't even save it in the database, which is really good because you don't want to be storing that sort of malicious JavaScript anyway in the database. Okay, so that's sanitization and protecting your form from being, or your WordPress from being potentially hacked. A couple of other things I missed was the fact that we've got these subfolders, like the includes folder here, that we haven't protected. So we just need to, essentially every single folder you create in the plugin, you have to protect it with an index.php file. Maybe just put that there. You can't be here. Also in here, index.php. You cannot be here. In assets, same sort of thing, index.php. You cannot be here. And then inside the folder here, the CSS folder, same thing. So essentially no one can access anywhere in the plugin directly through the, it just needs to be accessed through the absolute path for from WordPress. I might actually also do this inside all these, so add the check here as well in every single extra PHP page that we have. Just in case, you can't be too careful with this stuff. And we're not even using utilities, so I will remove the utilities by going in here and removing utilities, but definitely keep utilities if you think you'd need something that you can put some helper functions in there or whatnot. Okay, cool, so everything's working. So if I go ahead and just disable the plugin, the home page will just show the shortcode because the shortcode doesn't apply to anything. If I enable it, you'll see the form. Which is working great. It's not looking great, but it's working great. After looking at the code thoroughly, I've just realized that there are still some unsanitized fields that will be passed through to WordPress. So we need to protect them all. As you can see here, we have the raw parameters email, raw name, and also when we're creating a post, we're using the raw name as well. So the best thing to do would most likely be to set the fields here. So set the fields from the form. We'll get the field name. We'll just call it field name in the variable. And we'll do a sanitize text field. And what this function does in WordPress is it basically just removes any illegal characters that are not allowed in a string and returns it clean. Same thing with, we'll just go and recreate this. So the next one will be email. Next one will be phone. And next one will be message. So we're going to probably want to use the sanitize email WordPress function, which will just check that it's a valid email and remove anything from the email that's not allowed. Also with a sanitize with the phone, you can use it as a sanitize text field, and with the message, you could do sanitize text area, and that will, I'm pretty sure it is, sanitize text area field. And what that will do is it's just pretty much the same as sanitize text field, but it maintains the line breaks for a text area. All right, so now that we have these variables, let's go and replace them throughout here. So we have params email. Now we're going to replace it with field email. And name we'll replace with field name. We'll go here and replace this with field name. And the title with field name as well. The post title, again, field name. We'll go down here and we have the parameters that are automatically saving into our database. So this is going to be a bit of a problem. We might have to save it manually. Alternatively, what we can do is, actually, no, that's no problem at all because we're doing the sanitizing here of the data, but because we're looping through the form data, it doesn't know whether it is a text area or not. So we could probably do a switch statement and we switch the label, and inside there we'll do if the label is message, then we will how would we do this? If the label is a message, then the value will be sanitize text area field value. And if it is an email, this is only one way you can do it, but it might be easier to just hard code it. But if we're going to do it in the for loop, we'll do sanitize email. And then default would be just sanitize text field. And then basically we don't have to sanitize anything. And if you'll probably notice that I did sanitize of the label as well. which is just a text field, of course. Okay, so we're going to loop through each field that comes through on the form. It's going to check if the key is message. If it is, it's going to sanitize as a text area. If it's email, it's going to sanitize as an email. Otherwise, default, it will just do the normal sanitized text field. And also the parameters that are going to be showing in the actual email probably should be escaped as well. So I'm going to take this message from here, put it down there, and that should do it as well. We might sanitize this label as well. So it's getting a bit complicated, but what that will do is basically protect the plugin and everything from any malicious codes. The next thing we want to do is make sure that these settings in the plugin options actually affect what happens with the form. For instance, we want this to be the recipient email instead of using the admin email. And we also want to make the confirmation message come up when someone completes the form, and maybe have the ability to activate and deactivate. With carbon fields, there is an option. So if you go to the theme options page, there is a function called carbon get theme option where you can access the saved fields. So we'll copy that. We'll go back into our plugin. This would be the perfect time for us to create a utilities page. So if you remember, we had a utilities page before. I'm going to bring it back. And there it is. And then I'm also going to go into includes and do a file called utilities. And inside utilities, I'm just going to create a function, and I'm going to use a function name that makes sense to me. So maybe I'm going to do get plugin options. And the reason why I'm going to do that is because instead of using Carbon Fields way of doing it, which is carbon underscore get theme option throughout my plugin, I'm going to use mine. But we're still going to return the carbon get theme option function within it. It's essentially just a way to make it so your plugin is not going to be, if you're going to be accessing the custom fields throughout your plugin, instead of using Carbon Fields one, you create your own. And if in future you decide to change how options are stored in your theme, you don't have to go through every single part of your plugin to change Carbon Get Theme option. You would just go into this function and change how it's being retrieved from the database. Okay, so I've got that set up. And then what we want to do is go into our form, and let's do something. So if the form is not active, as seen here, then we don't want to show it at all. So maybe I'll do wrap it in an if statement. The whole thing. And we're going to check if it is active, so it can be displayed. So if we go to utilities, you'll see that we're going to be using this function, get plugin options, and the name. So the name represents the key that it's saved in with Carbon Fields. Let's go to our options dash page .php, and we need to make sure that we use the correct key. So in this case, it is contact plugin active. Let's put that in there. So if it is true, then show the form. If it's not, it's going to show nothing. Or we could do something like PHP else this form is not active. All right, let's go to the front end. It's working, but then if we untick active and hit save changes, it should say this form is not active. Okay, cool. So that is working fine. Then the recipient email as well. So with the recipient email, it kind of works exactly the same way. You use this function globally, so you can use it in another part of the plugin, and that would be on the contact form.php, and we go down to the handler where it's sending to the recipient. Okay, so right now when we're sending the email, we're sending it to the admin email. So what I might do is I might change that to be recipient email, and then we're going to use the key. Let's go back and look at what the actual key is. The key is contact underscore plugin underscore recipients. Okay, so contact underscore plugin recipients, and then we'll make the recipient that. But maybe we could do it in a way as well. Sorry, it's recipient email. We could do it in a way that if no email is set, then it will just send it to the admin. So if you have that blank, we'll make it just send by default to the administrator. So you could do something like this. We'll just leave recipient email like that. Then we'll do if recipient email. Actually, if not recipient email, then the recipient email equals the admin email. So the data is going to get passed through. It's going to set the admin email and admin name. Then it's going to set the recipient email based on the plugin options. And if it's null, so if there's nothing saved in there, then it's just going to set the recipient email to be the administration email. And that will send either way. So you don't have anything to worry about it not sending at all. Okay, so set recipient email. All right, and the last thing would be for this message to come up. And as you can see, we have a placeholder here called name. So we probably want that to be the person's name when they complete the form. So I'm doing hi name, your message has been sent successfully. All right, so our response when a message is sent successfully is currently hard-coded as the message was sent successfully. We just want to do another get plugin options set. I'll just put a note here, set confirmation message. And in there, we'll put confirmation message equals, and what we'll do is we'll actually grab this and put that there as default. So that's the default one. But if and we'll get the key, so the contact plugin message. If there is a contact plugin message, then the confirmation message will be the contact plugin message instead. So that way we always have a fallback. And then we're going to use confirmation message in there. Okay, return successful response. Let's go back into the plugin now and start typing away and see what comes up. Cool, but it says hi name. We obviously want that to be replaced with the name of the person who has sent the actual email. We can easily do a string replace on that. So if the contact message, the custom contact plugin message exists, then let's grab that and then let's set that variable again, and we're going to do a string replace on that. First thing we're going to do is search for name, and then we're going to replace it with the name of the actual person who's posted the message, so params name. And I believe we then have to actually put in confirmation message again, so it knows what it's searching through. So this should replace the name of the person with that dynamic field that we created. So let's go here, refresh it again, and we'll just do Sean, submit the form. There you go. Hi, Sean. Your message has been sent successfully. Fantastic. Another thing we might want to do is sort the menu items on the sidebar so that the submissions and the contact form are together. Well, it's quite easy. We just need to set the menu order for submissions and the menu order for contact form to be similar, or just one after each other. If we go back into our plugin, and with the create options page, Carbon Fields has the ability to sort the menu item. And we can do that by going to container make and then doing set page menu position. And I'm just going to make that, for instance, 80. Okay, we'll refresh it, and then contact form is at the bottom, of course. Then if we go to our register post type, there is, in our arguments, when we're actually creating the submissions post type, there is another option called, I believe, sorry, not menu option, menu position. And let's just make that 79. We'll give it a refresh, and there you should see submissions is, so settings must be 80 as well. So maybe what we'll do is we'll do submissions 30 and options page 30. There you go. So submissions and contact form are now together. Another feature that I've missed in WordPress is the fact that when we look at submissions, we can actually view the submission. If we click in that, it's actually going to try and load something on the front end. We do not want the submissions to be publicly accessible. So essentially we need to remove the whole functionality completely. To do that, let's go back into our custom post type, and there's another option called publicly queryable false. And that means it's purely going to be used on the back end of the website. So if we refresh that, it's saying page not found, but this theme that I'm using doesn't have a 404 page, so it's just a blank page. Let's refresh it now, and you should see that view link has completely gone now, and you can only view it by clicking on edit. Just to summarize what our plugin is doing now, I'm going to go to our plugins page and deactivate the plugin. You'll notice that it is not displayed on the sidebar. I'll go and activate it, and then you should see our custom post type as well as our plugin options there, which we can edit and save. And that saves perfectly. Then we can go to our submissions and we can see all of our submissions and even go into it and view it in a different way. You'll see that this says edit post. So what I might do is I might go into our post type and change, actually it's not in there, it's here, where is it? So it gets quite confusing after a while. Here's our submissions page. We might want to change some of the labels, and I believe changing the edit post is going to be edit item. Maybe we'll just change that to view submission, because you're not technically going to be editing it. There you go. So view submission, and so we can view the submission. We can then edit the settings, and we can go and fill out the form. So I'll just do another one here. Submit it. It goes through the REST API. It does a sanitization, and it comes through to our submissions page, which we can view. So that is how our plugin works. I'm going to stop the tutorial here because I could keep on going with new features, but what I'll do is I'm going to create extra videos which will show you an alternative way to do an options page. So if you don't want to use Carbon Fields, we'll do a different type of theme options page, which is more custom and more from scratch, but it gives you more flexibility in adding options. And then maybe I'll help do another video which will show you how to do Google reCAPTCHA integration, and from there we'll just keep on extending on this until we've covered all avenues. So I hope this is a good start with you and your plugin development journey. And obviously, if you have any comments, just comment below. And thank you very much. Cheers.